Hey everyone, Matthew Cruz here again. One of the questions I was recently asked, and actually I've been asked many times, which is what prompted me to record a video, is what do I do to learn F sharp? And I really appreciate this question, and I think it's super important, which is why I always enjoy answering it. But because I'm getting it asked so many times now, I felt like, you know what, I'm not scaling. I need to record something and document, what are the things that I found really valuable to get up and running with F sharp. And the first thing I would say, and it sounds really silly, is just try to do things. One of my favorite things to do is I take an algorithm that I really understand and I've implemented in another language and try to do it in F sharp. When I first started with F sharp, simulated annealing is an algorithm that I was very familiar with and had written in several languages. So I said, hey, to learn F sharp, I'm going to try writing simulated annealing, but in this new language. And that enabled me to focus just on the language and not on the algorithm, which was really helpful. So the takeaway is by just trying things you understand so that the only thing you're having to work on is the language and not the underlying problem is really helpful. I also found that just going through the practice of implementing algorithms or implementing solutions gave me an appreciation for the design of F sharp and why it's organized the way that it is. When I went into F sharp core and started looking at the collections library, which is a fantastic place to go learn how to write good F sharp, by the way, I didn't appreciate what was going on there. And after I had done F sharp for a couple of years, I gained a new appreciation for what was happening inside of there. So if you want to say, hey, like what would be the best approach for implementing this? I really recommend asking yourself, is there a existing collection that's very similar in F sharp core that I could go look at to be inspired by how they implemented it? And some of the stuff in there is way more advanced than what you'll need to do. But I have found that using that as my reference point to be very helpful. So do stuff, come up with ideas, try stuff, see what works. Yeah, you're going to have to try things because that process is going to expose some of the presuppositions that have been built up in your mind. If you've written mostly object-oriented code or procedural code, you're going to need to learn how to attack problems in new ways. And I find it really helpful to go through that process. And when I started writing F sharp, I did it very poorly. And it wasn't until I had been doing it for a while that I'm like, oh, okay, I see why these functions are organized the way that they are. I see why arguments are in this order. This is all making a lot more sense now. So the sooner you embrace that process of confronting your unknown biases in code, the sooner you're going to be able to break through and become highly productive in F sharp. I've actually found it easier to teach people F sharp who have not had a history in other programming languages. I sincerely believe F sharp is actually an easier language to learn than C sharp. I love C sharp. It's a great language. It is a huge language, and I admire the people who are productive in C sharp. I am not one of these people at this point. I sincerely believe F Sharp, because it is smaller, is easier to learn and is easier to teach. But if you're coming from a different paradigm, yes, it's more difficult. Okay, so some of those thoughts out of the way. What resources are helpful for learning F Sharp and getting up to speed? There are 4 books that I highly recommend, and it really depends on what your background is. So let's go ahead and go to Amazon. And one of the first books I recommend for people is an excellent book by Isaac Abraham called Get Programming with F Sharp. And I think, and I don't know if this was Isaac's intention or not, so don't think that I'm in the authority on this, but I find this extremely helpful to give to C# developers coming to F Sharp. Just his style and the way he provides comparison and contrast, I find really useful. It was enlightening to me when I read it. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't see things that way. And I've been primarily an F Sharp developer, but this was still a really useful book for me to read because it helped me to translate for C# developers that I was mentoring and coaching. So I love this book for that reason. Another one I really like is, let's see if I can type here, here it is. So this one is a gem. I love this one. If I'm talking to a developer who's never programmed before, this is often where I start. Kit did a really fantastic job describing F# style and how to think in an F# way. I think this is probably one of my most formative books in helping me understand what I had been seeing but not perceiving. I've been writing F#, I've been doing F#, I'd been productive in F#, and what Kit did for me is help me go from seeing in kind of grayscale to color. And I'm like, this is why we put arguments in this order. This is why we organize code in this way. And so I really like starting people with this book because it helps you avoid the things that would make F# painful. You could write really bad F# code, but going through Kit's book and developing some of his style that he suggests, you're going to avoid a lot of these pitfalls. And so I really like getting this into people's hands as quickly as possible. Another book that I really like is Domain Modeling Made Functional. I love this book. And I really love this book as a follow-up to the stylish F#, because it helps developers break problems down in such a way that they're going to be maintainable, robust, reliable. This is such a big deal. The idea of domain boundaries is so important and deeply underappreciated. When I'm working on a group of teams and we have these natural boundaries between us, but they're not always explicitly codified. And by adopting these principles, it makes it much easier for those teams to be able to evolve independently. They're right next to each other, but they can move independently and they can move reliably and quickly right next to each other. And that is incredibly important. And I think this book was extremely foundational for these teams, even before I joined them. So right after Stylish F#, I immediately put this into someone's hands because I want them to start thinking in this way. Like, what are the natural boundaries in the system? Because it is so critical that we create these really strong boundaries so that we can limit the amount of context required to reason about a problem. I know I threw a bunch of highfalutin words out there, but abstractions, we sometimes talk about having abstraction as like, oh, we don't need to think about that thing. It's behind some abstraction layer. That's great. But a really good abstraction also has a really strong boundary. So that we know that, like, hey, if I'm thinking within these boundaries, I don't need to worry about the world outside those boundaries. I need to think of a better way to explain that. But abstraction is more than just, I don't need to worry about how it's implemented. I don't need to worry about it leaking beyond particular business boundaries. And those are different things. It's one thing to not worry about how a query is executed. It's another thing to not have to worry about the impact of adjacent business units. They're different, but abstraction is meant to address both of those problems. Okay, so third book, another book I really love. This is kind of the Expert FSharp. So anything in the Expert FSharp series is really fantastic, and this is kind of the pinnacle book I point people to. Is like, okay, if you really want your mind blown, this is where you go. So this is the last book I recommend to people, and it dives really deep. And it's not a thorough analysis of all the features of FSharp, but it does hit many of the critical peaks in the language, and from there you can kind of search for the there's more in-depth blog posts or documentation that you can go look into. So I find this one really fun. I think it's a really important one for an experienced developer to get to and to at least be familiar with, because it's going to introduce a lot of the tools inside the language. And the language is still rapidly developing. So, but as far as books, I really like this one. I think the last one for F# books is Machine Learning and .NET. Where is it? Where is it? Oh my goodness, where is it? So it's one by Matthias Brandewinder. What? What is? I don't care about these things. I can't believe this isn't coming up. Oh, here it is. Okay, I didn't have the title correct. My bad. So you know this is live. So machine learning projects and for .NET developers. This is a really great one, and one of the reasons this is domain specific. I'm a machine learning engineer, so forgive me, but I still think it's really valuable for .NET developers, because what Matthias does is really unique in that he shows you how to implement things in F#. And so he takes these algorithms, these machine learning algorithms, which are actually not as scary as the world makes them sound, and he shows you how to write them in F#. And what I really appreciate about that is it really kind of disambiguates and takes the fear out of these algorithms. If you ever get an opportunity to take his workshop, it's really fantastic. But it's like, it's machine learning from the ground up. So even if you're not interested in this domain of machine learning, just the practice of implementing an algorithm in F#, I feel is really valuable and good stuff. So I would still recommend this book as kind of like a, hey, if you're looking for more stuff, this is probably a good way to go. So another great one for you to check out. There's some blogs that you should go to as well. So the one that everyone knows is F sharp for fun and for profit, right? So F sharp for fun for profit. Now, asterisk on this one. And it's hilarious because at the time that I'm recording this, Scott Vlashin just put out a tweet saying like, hey, there's now like a, if, if you're agreeing to use this website, like you agree that like, hey, this website's really old and some stuff in here that's a little weird. So recognize that this website has been built up over many years. And so if you're looking at really old code in here, it may like, hey, that seems a little funky. That's not idiomatic F sharp. Yeah, that's fine. If you want to, I believe that you can actually put in a pull request to like update things. So if you really care, you should go do that. But there's a lot of really, really valuable experience that has been put into this website. I think one of the most valuable things that you can do is one of the most valuable things you can do as a developer is to learn from other people's wisdom. And Scott has so much wisdom. He has programmed in many languages. He's been exposed to a lot of different domains. He's dealt with a lot of different languages, and just even if you're not into F sharp, just reading through his thought process and how he breaks down problems will make you a better developer. So if you're wanting to dramatically accelerate your ability to take a business problem and turn it into code in a robust and reliable way, you want to read this website. You will be a better developer. So go here, check it out. So another one is Mark Cman. So Mark will likely blow your mind. He is easily one of the smartest people I've ever had the opportunity to sit down and talk to. Super, super kind, very generous with his time. But his blog was one that really opened my mind to different ways of thinking about code. One of my most treasured memories was being able to sit on a boat with Mark on this like dinner cruise thing and just talk about programming as art. And it just like, my mind was reeling. It was fantastic. And as you read through his blog, you're going to see that artistic mindset through everything. And just some of his insights are like, wow, I never thought to look at a problem that way. So again, this is something that's really going to open your mind to see problems in new ways and think about them in just dramatically different lights. And so I think that's really valuable. So these are the things that I really recommend for people. It's other places. You could just go search for F sharp on YouTube and just see different videos. Mark has a couple of different courses on Pluralsight that I really recommend. I believe Kit Eason also has a course on Pluralsight. I believe there's about 6 courses on Pluralsight with regard to F sharp. They're all great. They're fantastic. I went through all of them, so they're a great learning opportunity. I believe you can sign up for Pluralsight for like a trial, and you can like just burn right through them. And Kit Eason also released a course on F sharp on Udemy recently, which I've been hearing is really great. I purchased it. I haven't had time, but these are the things that I have looked to and has really grown my understanding of F sharp. Beyond that, I recommend thinking of a project that you're interested in and digging into it and trying it in F sharp. That going through the process, writing the code, trying things, finding out where it's clunky, and then getting like a code review from somebody is super valuable. If you go into the F sharp Slack and say like, hey, would anybody be interested in looking at this code? I'm sure you'll be able to find somebody who would help sit down with you. If you're like in the optimization machine learning space and you want me to look at what you're doing, I'd be happy to kind of lend you my eye and say like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. So being a part of the community is going to be huge. So I hope this was helpful in providing you guidance on things that you can look into to develop your understanding of F Sharp and your skill in writing solutions. And so thank you very much. Until next time, make people's lives better with code. Thank you much.